That's horrific. It's free speech, but you shouldn't be employed anywhere if you're going to say that. And employers, you have an obligation to get rid of people. You need to look at people who are saying horrible things, and they shouldn't be working with you. Businesses cannot discriminate. If you want to go in and print posters with Charlie's pictures on them for a vigil, you have to let them do that. We can prosecute you for that. I have Harmeet Dillon right now in our civil rights unit looking at that immediately, that Office Depot had done that. We're looking at that. But Sean, there's free speech and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything, and that's across the aisle.
That is Pam Bondi. She's the Attorney General. She's supposed to oversee the Department of Justice. Hey everyone, Dylan Schumacher, Citadel Defense, and we're here today to talk about justice. If you watched our last episode, our last Knight Rider episode about the death of Charlie Kirk, one of the things that we talked about was how we are a justice-starved people. We, as a people in America, are justice-starved. The government's job is to enforce justice. That's the point. Or if you don't like that word, because that feels a little corrupted from the left wing in the past some years, you could say righteousness, right? Or judge with right judgment. Like, that's the government's job, is to enforce true, real, actual justice. That's why God made governments on earth. And when a government doesn't do that, there are consequences, right? We are seeing those consequences in real time right now as we live through perhaps one of the most historic moments in American history, certainly in the top 5 of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. The assassination of Charlie Kirk was both a culmination of living in a world without justice. So, because we live in a time without justice, people were emboldened or thought it was a good idea, or thought they could get away with it, or otherwise made a plan to assassinate Charlie Kirk, which is horrible and wrong and evil. And we're led here because we don't enforce justice. Charlie Kirk's assassination is also a tipping point, because at this, or a turning point, right? Because at this point, either we are going to start enforcing justice, or we're not. And if we don't, do we have a nation left? Like what is that? If there's no justice in the land, if it's not being enforced by people whose explicit job it is to enforce it, then again, what is that? It's not a country. And if, historically speaking, if you deny a people justice long enough, they go get it themselves. That's not like some kind of threat or being ominous. That's like, look, that's just historical fact. You look at the historical record. People will only live in a time without justice, perceived or real or otherwise, for so long before they seek it themselves. That's just historical reality. So if we're going to live in a land without justice, that's a problem. This is where the United States government they have one chance. They have one chance to pull this back from the brink before this gets really, really bad. And right now, they are doing an absolutely perfect job of blowing it. Right? Like, absolutely. You couldn't incompetently screw this up more than they are screwing it up right now, I don't think. If you intentionally tried to make it bad, could you do a worse job? I'm not sure. So here we have Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, right? The person who oversees the DOJ, they oversee the FBI, talking about hate speech. I can barely even get these words out. It's so mentally deficient. She is so clearly incompetent or stupid or evil or some combination thereof that she's deciding to talk about hate speech. Charlie Kirk, the man who died speaking his mind, the man, a free speech advocate who would go to places where people would tell him he was saying hate speech, by trying to preach true things and tell people about Jesus and have open and honest discussions, they would say, you're just preaching hate speech. That guy, who was then killed by those people who told him he was preaching hate speech, in order to honor that person and remember them and really fight back against people who killed him, Pam Bondi is going to go all in on hate speech and how it's wrong. And just in case you thought, oh yeah, those clips are maybe out of context, like, it doesn't, well, she logged into Twitter this morning just to verify it. So let me help you out here. Hate speech that crosses the line into threats of violence is not protected by the First Amendment. It's a crime. For far too long, we've watched the radical left normalize threats, call for assassinations, and cheer on political violence. That era is over. Under 18 U.S.C. 875C, it is a federal crime to transmit any communication containing any threat to kidnap any person or any threat to injure the person of another. Likewise, 18 U.S.C. 876 and 18 U.S.C. U.S. Justice Code, I believe is what that stands for, 115, make it a felony to threaten public officials, members of Congress, or their families. You cannot call for someone's murder. You cannot swat a member of Congress. You cannot dox a conservative family member and think it will be brushed off as free speech. These acts are punishable crimes, and every single threat will be met with the full force of the law. Free speech protects ideas, debate, even dissent, but it does not and will never protect violence. It is clear that violent rhetoric is designed to silence others from voicing conservative ideals. We will never be silenced, not for our families, not for our freedoms, and never for Charlie. His legacy will not be erased by fear or imitation. So on one hand, you can say, oh, okay, Dylan, well, think about it. Like what she's saying is, they're not going to take violent threats of action. And that's good. We should enforce the law against, violence and threats and those things. And so that's what she's trying to say. Yeah, okay. It doesn't make her any less retarded. Like that's already a law. That's already a thing. Why are you using the leftist coded word hate speech? You know what hate speech is? Hate speech is any speech that I just don't like. And so I don't think you should be allowed to say it. That's what hate speech is. That's what the left has meant by that term since they've used it. They say hate speech to say, you're saying things that I don't like, so you should shut up and that shouldn't be allowed. That's what it means. That's been the definition of the term since the beginning. So now why is the supposedly conservative United States Attorney General tweeting and doing interviews about hate speech? How retarded, how mentally deficient, how completely incompetent do you have to be to think that's a good idea? You can't release the Epstein files. You can't be bothered to prosecute people who went after January 6th people or COVID-era tyrannies. You can't be bothered to clean out the FBI. You can't be bothered to enforce real, actual, purposeful justice. You can't be bothered to aggressively pursue the Charlie Kirk investigation and go after all the different organizations that are threatening violence in America and actually make some arrests. You can't be bothered to do that, but you can be bothered to go on national television and talk about hate speech. Make this make sense. And just in case you think I'm blowing this out of proportion, I even looked up the word justice. What's the definitional meaning of the word, right? The quality of being just, fairness, the principle of moral rightness, decency, conformity to moral rightness in action or attitude, righteousness. Right? That's what the word means. How is going after speech you don't like enforcing justice? How is not doing any of the acts, solving any of the actual crimes, going after any of the actual criminals? How about investigating insider trading in Congress, for example? How about looking at election fraud during the 2020 election specifically? How about going after anything other than getting on interviews and talking about talk? How about enforcing justice? That's what the people need. That's what the Republicans were overwhelmingly elected to do. How about making sure we deport every single illegal immigrant? Right? How about canceling H-1B visa scams and getting rid of that entire debacle that's destroying our nation? Like, there are lots of justice-oriented, righteousness, fairness-oriented things that Pam Bondi could be doing or pursuing. Instead, she's talking about talk. Think about how stupid that is. So again, I want you to realize we're at this historical moment in American history. Right now, we're living through it right now. And we're at the tipping point, the turning point, and it's going to decide whether or not we continue as a nation and are able to restore justice and rightness in the land, or if it's going to spiral into something super, super ugly that no one wants or no one should want. And that's it. That's happening right now in real time. As you're watching this video, as we're living through it, we're at the moment where that gets decided. The effects might not be felt for a couple of years. I don't know. But I'm telling you, this is it. This is the turning point, right? Where we decide if we're going to be a nation that enforces justice and punishes evil, or if the government is wholesale going to abdicate punishing evil and might even just go back to punishing good again, like they did under the Biden years. Like, that's it. That's the decision we're at. You watching this video probably don't have too much power to help influence that decision. I don't really have too much power to influence that decision, right? However, I just want you to understand where you're at in history, understand what, God willing, won't happen, but is a very real possibility that they are flirting with, right? They're not taking a hard right and just going hard into enforcing justice. They're pretending. They're talking about hate speech. The president isn't even being bothered to deal with, go to the Charlie Kirk's memorial or anything. Like, it's so insanely ridiculous. J.D. Vance and Stephen Miller seem to actually care. They seem to be like some of the only people in government that actually care. This is the chance. This is the time when they can feed the people justice. Because if they don't, people only wait for the waiters so long before they get up and go into the kitchen and cook themselves food. Okay, that's just how, again, that's how it works. Like it, hate it, good, bad, or indifferent, that's how it works. If we want to avoid that, which I do and you should, then they have to do their jobs. They have to do their jobs. That's the only way out of this, is for the United States government to serve people justice, right? So that when some random black guy stabs some random white girl on a neck in the train, he gets the death penalty. Why? Because that's a punishment for murder. That's why. Like, you have to feed the people justice. And if you don't, if you let these incidents go and you sweep them under the rug, then you get more Charlie Kirks, not less. If you go after hate speech, you're going to get more Charlie Kirks, not less. And it's only so long before people get excited about it. So that's where we're at in this point in history. I want you to understand that and have your head up. I hope that's not depressing, although maybe it is, but that's not the point. The point is to just be aware that you're at this very important moment in history. And like I said, right now is what's going to determine the next decade, 2 decades, 3 decades in America. The government has to do their job. Pray that they do. Prepare if they don't. Do brave deeds and endure.